The morning Clara Steele rode into Verde Valley, the sun barely awake, casting a pale gold light across the sandstone cliffs. The land here met you head-on, no soft greetings, no slow introductions. Just the harsh, bright desert, the wind hissing through the sagebrush, and the raw truth that nothing survived here unless it knew how to stand its ground. Clara knew she fit right in. After all, trouble had a way of following her, much like a stubborn trail dog, and she'd learned long ago to square her shoulders and push through it. Today was supposed to be a fresh start, new job, new place, a chance to prove she wasn't just the loud-mouthed horse trainer who wasn't afraid to speak her mind to officers. The army hadn't appreciated her bluntness or her right hook when a man tried to trap her in a tack room. She didn't regret either. Now she was riding toward a makeshift corral along the Verde River where a ranch foreman had hired her to break and transport some wild mustangs. Simple enough. She could handle horses blindfolded, half asleep, barefoot. It was the people she had trouble with, especially the quiet, brooding ones. Little did she know she was about to meet one. The corral came into view. The fence sagged, the shade cover half collapsed, and 3 mustangs paced in restless circles inside. A man knelt beside a newly crafted saddle stand, fitting reins with careful, deliberate hands. He didn't look up when she rode in, didn't pause, didn't greet her. The lack of acknowledgement irked her instantly. Clara swung off her horse, dusted herself off, and marched toward him. "Morning, I'm Clara Steele. You the—" The mustang behind her snorted, jerking the rope she'd tied too loosely around the fence post. Startled, Clara spun around, bumping into the saddle stand. The whole thing wobbled, and before she could catch it, the brand-new saddle slid off straight into the river. The man finally looked up, and Clara wished he hadn't. His eyes were dark and tense, but unreadable. Sun-kissed skin hair, braided back, a jawline strong as stone. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need words, because he never needed many. He stood slowly, boots sinking into the sand. Clara opened her mouth to say something, but all that came out was a strangled, "That wasn't supposed to happen." He stared at the drifting saddle, then back at her. He muttered something low in a language Clara didn't understand, but she caught the tone, one that wasn't exactly friendly. "Good morning, ma'am." "Oh, really?" She snapped, hands on her hips. "If you've got something to say, you can say it in English." He blinked, surprised she'd snapped back at him. Then his voice rolled out in a steady baritone, deep as distant thunder. "I said the river takes what it wants." "Well," she shot back, "maybe if someone had bothered to say hello, I wouldn't have knocked it in." "That was hello," he said. Clara stared at him, incredulous. "Are you serious?" Before he could answer, a burst of laughter rang out from nearby. A girl, maybe 15, stood at the corral gate, eyes bright as the morning sun, long black hair spilling over her shoulders. She grinned wide enough to show a missing back tooth. "You two know each other already?" she asked. "No." They both snapped in unison. The girl doubled over with laughter. "Oh, this is gonna be fun." Clara exhaled sharply and extended her hand. Clara knew horse trainer. The man hesitated, but finally shook her hand. His grip was warm, steady, too steady. "Zane," he said, "I make saddles and tack. Fix things, sometimes people." The girl piped up. "I'm Rhea. I kinda fix him." Zane shot her a look, but Rhea just grinned even wider. Clara eyed him. "Do you usually greet folks by watching their saddles float away?" He shrugged. "Most folks don't drop them." "Oh, I like him already," Rhea chimed in. Clara did not. Still, she rolled up her sleeves and waded into the cold river without hesitation. At least, the saddle had floated toward the shallows. Clara reached for it, slipped, caught herself, slipped again, and on the third try, managed to grab the soaked leather and haul it back. Zane crouched beside her as she dragged it ashore, inspecting the damage. "Stitching's ruined," he said simply. Clara bristled. "I can fix stitching. Not this stitching." Clara scowled so hard her forehead ached. Dusty, her horse, snorted behind her, clearly amused. Zane didn't comment, didn't smirk, didn't sigh. Didn't. He simply picked up the saddle water streaming off it and walked away toward his workbench, that maddening quiet of his, surrounding him, as if chaos didn't follow Clara Steele everywhere. She huffed, hands on her hips. "Is he always like that?" Clara asked, raising an eyebrow. "Oh yeah," Rhea replied cheerfully. "But don't worry, he talks more once he trusts you." Clara squinted at Zane's broad back. "So next year, maybe the year after," she muttered, earning another burst of giggles from Rhea. The sun climbed higher, warming the valley, and Clara felt a reluctant amusement sink in. Her fresh start had begun, wet boots, bruised pride, unreadable Apache saddlemaker and all. Nothing about Verde Valley was going to be easy. But easy had never been her style. The storm rolled in at dusk, one of those sudden desert tempests that gave no warning, except for a strange stillness in the air. Clara felt it before she heard it. The tightening in her chest, the way Dusty kept tossing his head, the mustangs growing restless, sensing trouble, long before humans did. Then the wind hit. Canvas ripped like rifle fire. The half-collapsed shade cover Clara had been fixing whipped around violently. It flew sideways, and a fence rail snapped clean in two. The corral rattled, the entire post shaking from the impact. Rhea shouted from the porch of the tack shed, arms waving. "Clara, you're gonna blow away out there." "I'm fine," Clara yelled back, right before a pile of metal feed buckets sailed past her head. She ran for shelter, her boots slogging through the fresh mud, her hair whipping her face like angry snakes. She dove into the shed just as the sky cracked open with lightning. Zane stood near the doorway, arms crossed, not a hair out of place. How a man could stay that steady in weather like this was a mystery Clara didn't have the answer to. "You should have come in sooner," he said, voice level. "If you wanted me inside sooner, you could have hollered." Clara shot back. "I did." "Well, holler louder next time," Rhea giggled, plopping down beside a stack of hay. "Told you she was trouble." Clara stuck her tongue out at Rhea. Rhea returned the gesture, proud as a cat. But the storm wasn't just loud, it was destructive. After an hour, the corral roof had torn completely off. 2 sections of fence lay flat, and the foreman's little bunkhouse, where Clara was supposed to sleep, had lost half its shingles. When Clara stepped outside to take a look, the rain plastered her hair to her cheeks. She sighed. "Well, there goes my room," Rhea gasped dramatically. "You can't sleep out here." Zane glanced at the wreckage, then back at Clara. "You'll stay with us tonight." Clara blinked. "What, no? No, absolutely no. You don't even like me." "I don't dislike you," Zane said. "Not enough to let you drown." "My standards are higher than that," Clara muttered. But Rhea was already tugging on her arm. "Come on, Clara. We got extra blankets and everything, and Zane snores, so you'll feel right at home." "I do not snore," Zane said with a quiet scowl. "Yes, you do," Rhea corrected sweetly. Clara sighed, defeated by the storm, the wreckage, and one determined 15-year-old with big brown eyes. "Fine one night, but if he snores loud enough to shake the walls, I'm sleeping in the barn." Rhea brightened. "Deal." Zane's cabin was a short walk up the river, small, but neat, built of sun-baked pine. The moment Clara stepped inside, she felt warm, too warm. If she had to admit it, the place smelled faintly of cedar and leather oil, and everything was arranged with precision. The contrast between the tidy order and the absolute chaos she usually carried around made her feel visible like a muddy boot print on a clean floor. Rhea shoved a towel into Clara's hands. "Dry off before you melt." Clara laughed, rubbing her hair. "Thanks. Didn't realize I was made of sugar." "You're too sweet not to be," Rhea chirped. Zane, who was stirring something on the stove, let out a soft grunt that might have been a laugh or indigestion. Hard to tell with him. Dinner was a simple stew, beans, venison, a few chopped vegetables, but it tasted like the kind perfected over years. Clara took a bite and closed her eyes. "Oh my lord, this is good." Zane shrugged. "Basic food." No, 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 no. This is heavenly. You could make a fortune selling this." He raised an eyebrow. "Who do you think bites saddles? I trade stew for leather sometimes." Clara laughed so hard she nearly spilled her bowl. Rhea was beaming like she'd invented the meal herself. After dinner came the chaos. Clara offered to help clean up a big mistake. The first dish she washed slipped through her soapy fingers, clattering into the sink. Rhea gasped. "That's Zane's favorite bowl." "It's fine." Clara stammered. "Look, it didn't break." "Because it didn't hit the floor," Zane said dryly. Clara narrowed her eyes. "Do you do this on purpose?" "Do what?" "Look at me like I'm a horse with 3 legs. A horse with 3 legs wouldn't drop bowls." He didn't even blink as he replied. Rhea choked on her laughter and had to turn away. Clara slammed the bowl onto the drying rack. "I swear I'm cursed tonight," Clara muttered. "You were cursed this morning too," Zane added. "How's that?" "You didn't say hello." "I said hello in Apache, which I don't speak." "Not my problem." "Well, it should be." Rhea jumped in, hands waving to stop the argument. "All right, enough. No fighting under my roof." Her roof. Clara and Zane exchanged a glance, then looked at Rhea, both of them sighing. Rhea clapped her hands with triumph. "Good. Now, Clara, you get the spare cot." Clara followed Rhea into the small back room. The cot was tiny, the blankets mismatched, and a cracked lantern flickered weakly in the corner. "It's perfect," Clara whispered softly. Rhea unexpectedly hugged her. "I'm glad you're staying. You'd make things fun." Clara hugged her back, feeling a warmth settle in her chest that had nothing to do with the stew. "You too, kid." Once Rhea left, Clara lay down, listening. Zane and Rhea murmured a few words in Apache. The wind rattled the cabin walls and a log cracked in the stove. Slowly Clara realized she was smiling. Not because the day had gone well, not because she felt comfortable, not because anything made sense, but because for the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. Out here in the wild, chaotic corners of Verde Valley, surrounded by strangers, broken fences, and snoring, Clara wasn't ready to admit it. She felt something unfamiliar. She felt almost like she belonged, and that scared her more than the storm ever could. Clara woke to sunlight stabbing through the thin curtains and the distinct sound of someone chopping wood outside. She rolled over on the cot, groaning. She wasn't sure what ached more, the muscles in her back or her pride from all the ways she'd embarrassed herself yesterday. The cabin smelled faintly of coffee and venison stew, reheated on the stove. Clara dragged herself upright, blindly, reaching for her boots. Rhea poked her head in, without knocking. "Zane says breakfast is ready. He made corn cakes and he didn't burn them this time." "That sounds comforting," Clara mumbled, still half asleep. Rhea giggled. "He's been up since dawn. He said he had things to fix." Clara paused. "Does he ever sleep?" "Nope." "Does he ever smile?" "Sometimes, usually when you're mad." Clara groaned again. "Great." Breakfast was quieter than Clara expected. Zane wasn't much of a talker to begin with, but this morning he was practically silent. His expression was unreadable, his movements steady, measured, maddeningly calm. Clara sipped her coffee, watching him over the rim. He was too composed, too smooth, too still. She hated how interesting she found that. Rhea, sensing trouble, grinned like she was watching a saloon show. "So," she said brightly, "what are we doing today?" Zane finally looked up. "Fixing the corral fence." Clara nodded. "And the shade cover." After breakfast, Zane added, "Good." Clara straightened. "I like a full schedule." Zane arched an eyebrow. "You like arguing more." "I do not." Don't move me. Ria's smile grew dangerously wide. You two are a storm waiting to happen. I am calm, Zane said. I am calm, Clara insisted. You yelled that, Zane replied. Clara slammed her fork down. I give up. Zane didn't even flinch. You never do. By mid-morning, the storm debris was cleared. The sun hammered down on them as they repaired rails, hauled lumber, and reset fence posts. Clara tackled most tasks with stubborn energy, determined not to look weak or worse, incompetent, next to Mr. Stoneface Apache himself. Zane didn't comment, but Clara caught him watching her more than once, his expression faintly amused. She pretended not to notice. Around noon, they took a break under the one piece of shade still standing. Ria passed around water. Clara wiped her brow dramatically. If I get any sweatier, I'm going to slide right out of my own skin. Ria snorted. Zane sweats too. He just pretends he doesn't. Zane drank his water unbothered. I don't pretend. Yes, you do, Ria insisted. You never look tired. Clara shrugged. That's just because he thinks emotions are optional. Zane finally looked at her. I have emotions. Clara blinked. Name one. There was a long pause, then a hint of annoyance in his voice. At me. At many things. Uh-huh. Another silence. Then Clara swore she saw his mouth twitch just barely. She pointed at him. There, you almost smiled. Ria gasped theatrically. A miracle. Zane exhaled hard. You too. Clara grinned, feeling unreasonably proud. Later that afternoon, while Ria went inside to rest, Clara and Zane found themselves alone by the tack shed, fixing a halter. The air around them shifted, growing still, almost expectant. For some reason that made her nervous. To cover it up, she spoke. You know, for someone who barely says a word, you sure make a lot of noise. Zane didn't look up from his work. And for someone who talks all the time, you say very little. Clara's jaw dropped. Excuse me. He returned to stitching the leather without an ounce of apology. You heard me. Oh, you're asking for it now? A flicker of something in his eyes, curiosity, challenge. Something warm she didn't want to name. Clara planted her hand on her hip and flicked her hair dramatically. Maybe you're just intimidated by my charm. Zane paused mid-stitch. Your what? My charm, my feminine wiles. Zane didn't flinch. You have those. Oh, I have them, Clara insisted. I just don't waste them. He still wasn't convinced. Of course, that meant Clara had to prove a point. She stepped closer, not too close, but enough that she could lean an elbow on the workbench, tilt her head, and flash the kind of smile she'd used 100 times to get under the skin of men who thought they were invincible. So tell me, Zane, she purred, fluttering her lashes just a little. Do you always glower at women who find you interesting? Zane didn't flinch, didn't stammer, didn't even blink. He simply set down the stitching, stood up, and stepped into her space. Before Clara had a chance to back away, he reached out, gentle but confident, and lifted her straight onto his lap as he sat down on the bench behind her. Clara froze. Her breath stopped, her heartbeat, her entire nervous system, everything just froze. Zane's voice was low, warm against her ear. I'd like to know, he murmured, where the bold woman who was flirting with me a moment ago went. Clara made a noise that wasn't quite a word. She had just realized with a horrifying jolt that she was sitting on his lap, his actual lap, his arms lightly holding her at her waist, steadying her, his chest warm against her back. And she stayed very, very still. Zane tilted his head, his voice soft. Why so quiet now? Clara shot up so fast she nearly flipped the bench. You're out of your mind. She stumbled back 3 steps, her face flushed with heat. You can't. What kind of man does that? Zane didn't chase her, didn't explain. He just sat there, his forearms casually resting on his knees, watching her like she was a startled deer. And he smiled, wide, not cocky, just a small amused curl of his lips, a private smile, a secret one for her. Then under his breath, soft enough for only her to hear, he whispered, "You make me a little crazy, my easy." Clara, meanwhile, had ducked behind a hay bale, whispering frantic prayers to any deity who might rewind time. She pressed her hands to her burning cheeks. "Oh, no, 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 no. I am never flirting again with anyone ever." Rhea poked her head out of the cabin door, just in time to see Clara melting behind the hay pile. "What happened?" Rhea asked. Clara squeaked. "Nothing." Zane called back mildly. "She fell." "I did not," Clara yelped. Rhea blinked at her, then at Zane before bursting into giggles so loud they startled the Mustangs. Clara wanted the earth to swallow her whole. Zane just leaned back, arms crossed, that tiny smile still lingering. For the first time since coming to Verde Valley, Clara Steele wasn't sure who was winning, or if she even wanted to win at all. The next morning came in quiet, too quiet for Clara's liking. She half expected Zane to bring up yesterday's disaster of her accidentally ending up on his lap, but he acted like it had never happened. He didn't tease, didn't smirk, didn't even give her a sideways glance that hinted at the memory, which somehow made it worse, much worse. Clara spent half the morning suspiciously watching him, waiting for a trap that never sprang. Every time their eyes met, he just nodded, handed her a tool, or asked about a fence post. Nothing teasing, nothing smug, just normal. And normal apparently drove her insane. Rhea, however, was having the time of her life. The girl kept bouncing between the tack shed and the corral, full of energy, like someone who hadn't been told to rest. "I'm fine," Rhea told Clara after the third time Clara tried to get her to rest. "If I sit too long, my thoughts get loud." Clara understood more than she wanted to admit. By the afternoon, the three of them were working on mending the shade cover near the Mustang corral. Zane was up on a ladder, tying new canvas, while Clara held it steady and Rhea handed up nails. That's when Clara saw it. A symbol marked in ash on the far fence rail. A crude circle with 3 slashes across it. Her stomach tightened. She'd seen that symbol before out on the hill trail where a band of thieving men had tried to corner a Mustang just last week. They'd taunted Zane, thrown rocks at him, told him that Apache hands had no business guarding government horses. Clara hadn't liked those men then. She liked them even less now. "Zane," she said softly, her voice tense. "We've got trouble." He climbed down from the ladder in one fluid motion, following her gaze to the fence. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping under his cheek. Rhea frowned. "Is that bad?" Zane didn't answer immediately. He crouched near the mark, studying it with the stillness of a man listening to the earth itself. "It means they were here," he said finally, his voice cold. "Looking. Planning." Clara crossed her arms, throat tight. "The same group as before." Zane nodded once. "They want Mustangs," he said. "They want money, and they want to make sure anyone in their way stays out of the way." Clara felt heat rise behind her ribs. "I swear if they lay a finger on these horses." But before she could finish, a light cough interrupted her. Rhea wobbled, one hand gripping the fence. Clara was at her side in a heartbeat. "Whoa, hey, sit down, breathe." Rhea waved her off. I'm fine, it's just hot." But Clara saw the paleness under Rhea's warm skin, the way her breath fluttered too shallow. Panic flickered low in her belly. "Easy," Clara murmured, guiding her to a shady spot. Zane was already beside them, kneeling down. His hands, usually so steady, were now too careful, too gentle. "Did you take your medicine?" he asked. Rhea nodded weakly. "Just got dizzy." Clara touched her shoulder, trying to keep her voice light. "You don't have to help all the time. You can rest, you know." Rhea gave a small, brave smile. But you and Zane might kill each other. Clara snorted. We don't fight that much. Rhea raised both brows. Do you hear yourselves? Zane stood up. I'll get water. He walked briskly toward the cabin. Clara sat beside Rhea, trying to hide her worry. She brushed the girl's hair back gently. You scared me. Rhea shrugged. I try. When Zane returned, they helped Rhea inside the cabin to rest. But even as Clara watched Rhea settle under a blanket, she couldn't shake the dread curling in her chest. Worry not just for Rhea's health, but for the trouble circling the valley like vultures. The next morning, Clara woke early, barely having slept. Her dreams had been filled with strange noises and shifting shadows in the dark. She and Zane had taken turns checking the horses, but every time they found nothing disturbed, that symbol on the fence still gnawed at her mind. Toward noon, Clara insisted on checking the western section of the pasture. Zane followed her, though he didn't say a word. He walked beside her, deliberate and quiet. About halfway there, Clara stopped, her heart thudding in her chest. The western gate to the side pastures was slightly ajar. Her throat clenched. I locked that yesterday, she whispered. Zane moved past her, pushing the gate open with the tip of his boot. The latch had been bent backward, forcibly pried open. Fresh footprints marked the dirt, heavy, wide-strided. A long streak in the dust showed where something had been dragged. A horse, a tool, a trap. Clara wasn't sure, but Zane knew. His expression hardened into something cold and sharp. They're watching us, he said. Clara swallowed, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. Then why leave the gate open? Why mark the fence? So when something goes wrong, Zane replied quietly, the blame points at the wrong person. Her pulse quickened, her throat dry. Meaning me. Zane met her gaze, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, not for her, but for Rhea. They know she helps with the horses, he said. They know she wanders at night sometimes to check on them. Clara's heart sank. You think they'll try something soon? Zane turned toward the cabin, his eyes narrowing. I think they already have a plan. A gust of desert wind swept through the tall grass, bending the dry blades like warning fingers pointing toward the house. Toward Rhea. For the first time since coming to Verde Valley, Clara felt something stir inside her. Something sharp, fierce, protectiveness she didn't quite understand. We won't let them touch her, she said, her voice firm. Zane didn't hesitate. No. But as they walked back toward the cabin, even as the sun beat down warm and bright, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The valley felt like it was stalking them, waiting, and Clara couldn't escape the sense of dread creeping up her spine. The dry, shimmering heat settled over the valley like a rattler coiled and waiting to strike, just not yet. The night it happened was unnervingly still. One of those desert nights where the air hangs thick and even the crickets grow quiet, as if waiting for trouble. Clara had that uneasy feeling like she was forgetting something. A noise, a shadow, and footprints by the western gate. She paced outside the cabin, checking the fences twice, 3 times. Zane had noticed. You're jumpy, he murmured. I'm alert, Clara corrected. You're both, he replied deadpan. Rhea laughed from her cot inside. She's always both. Clara shot her a glare from the doorway. You're supposed to be resting, and you're supposed to stop yelling at the fence, Rhea countered. Clara threw her hands up. I'm not yelling at the fences. Zane arched a brow. You yelled at a tumbleweed 10 minutes ago. That thing surprised me. Rhea giggled, then coughed tight and shallow, a sound that Clara didn't like one bit. She moved to sit beside the girl, brushing her hair back gently. You sure you're okay? I'm fine, Rhea whispered. Just tired. Clara forced a smile, though unease coiled inside her like smoke. The hours crawled by. Near midnight, Zane stepped outside with a lantern to check the corral again. Clara followed, unable to sit still. The mustangs were restless ears, pricked, pacing nostrils flaring. "They feel something," Clara murmured. "They know." Zane didn't reply. He was staring toward the western ridge. Then they heard it, a distant crack, too sharp to be a twig, too light to be a gunshot, more like something metal striking wood. Clara stiffened. "That's from the west gate." Zane didn't waste a breath. He grabbed his rifle and ran. Clara sprinted after him. The wind shifted, bringing with it a scent she instantly recognized. Sweat dust and the sour tang of a fear-driven horse. But there was something else under it, gun oil. And men. They didn't have to wait long to see them. A horse burst from the tall grass, eyes wide with terror, foam spraying from its mouth. It wasn't one of the mustangs. It was a workhorse bucking wildly as if being chased. Clara saw where it was headed before she even fully understood the cabin. The front porch. "Nina!" she screamed, sprinting. Zane's voice cracked like a whip. "Nina, stay inside." But Nina, stubborn, gentle. Nina was already at the door, drawn by the shouting. She stepped outside in her nightdress, confused, frightened. "Nina, get back," Clara cried. Then the horse barreled toward them. Clara didn't think. She just launched forward, grabbing Nina and yanking her sideways with all her strength. The horse thundered past, so close that the ground shook beneath their feet. But the danger wasn't over. One of the men, desperate to redirect the horse, hurled a rope. The weighted end metal knot whipped through the air, striking the ground, right where Clara and Nina had fallen. The rope snapped taut, slamming across Nina's shins just as she lost her footing. The girl hit the dirt, hard, twisting as the rope yanked cruelly before slipping free. Clara tumbled beside the cedar, her breath exploding from her lungs. Nina gasped, then didn't inhale again. Her eyes widened, panic spilling across her face as her trembling hands pressed to her chest. "No," Clara whispered. "No, no, no." "Nina, breathe, sweetheart, breathe." Nina's breath stuttered, shallow, broken. Her lips twitched, trying to form a word. Clara cupped her face. "Stay with me. Look at me." But Nina's gaze shifted, a mix of fear, confusion, and pain, and then she crumpled. Clara screamed, the sound tearing through the valley. Zane reached them, seconds later, sliding to his knee, scooping Nina into his arms. "Nina!" Zane shouted. "Nina! Hey, look at me!" There was no answer. Her small hand curled weakly, then went limp. Clara pressed her hands to her mouth, her heart thundering like a trapped animal. Footsteps thundered toward them, one of the men barreling into view. A familiar voice snarled, "Thanks for keeping the gate open, lady." Clara's blood froze. The man spat at her feet before turning to flee, leaving behind a scrap of cloth he'd torn from her bandana. He threw it like an accusation. Zane stared at the fabric, then at the open gate, then at Clara, and something inside him broke. "What did you do?" His voice barely rose above a whisper, but it was more terrifying than a shout. Clara froze. "Zane, I didn't... The gate. I swear I..." "You left it open." Zane said, his voice tight with frustration, the words more of a judgment than a question. Clara shook her head wildly. "No, I didn't. They broke the latch, Zane. They tricked us." Zane snapped, his breath ragged. "You and Rhea were outside. If you hadn't..." Clara's heart twisted, her voice breaking as she tried to explain. "I pulled her out of the way. I tried, Zane. Please listen to me." But he wasn't listening. Grief had swallowed him whole, and grief is a cruel, blinding thing. Zane laid Rhea's limp body gently on the ground, trembling hands lingering on her tiny form as if willing her back with his touch. His eyes were empty, hollow with pain. "This shouldn't have happened," Zane whispered hoarsely. "Not to her, not to Rhea." Clara's tears blurred her vision. She reached for him, but he recoiled as if her touch burned. "Don't," he rasped. "Don't touch me." The words hit harder than any blow could. Clara stumbled back, her body faltering under the weight of his grief. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice thick with guilt. "I didn't mean to. I never would have, Zane. I loved her too." Zane's voice cracked and he lifted his eyes to her. The raw pain in his gaze nearly tore her apart. "If not for you," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "she wouldn't have been outside." Clara shook her head, choking on her own sorrow. "I was trying to protect her, Zane." She didn't get a chance to explain further. Zane's face twisted in agony, and the sound of his broken heart was louder than any words. He gripped Ria's hand, his entire body trembling with grief, and finally, through his anguish, he whispered, "Leave." Clara froze, the word ripping through her like a bullet. "Leave." Zane repeated, his voice raw, like the cry of an animal wounded beyond repair. She staggered to her feet, her own heart shattering as she felt the force of his pain push her away. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, but she knew it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Without another word, she turned and fled into the night. Behind her, the sound of Zane's sobs tore through the silence of the desert. The valley that had once felt warm, full of promise, now felt empty, cold. Clara Steele, who had come to this place to escape her own past, now carried a new burden. The crushing belief that she had caused the death of the girl she loved like a sister and the loss of the only man she had begun to trust. Clara didn't remember much of leaving the valley. Only the cold winds slapping against her cheeks, the burn in her lungs, and the sound of her boots pounding the dirt as she ran farther than she ever thought possible. She found shelter in the abandoned foreman's shack near the ridge, curling under an old horse blanket. Her tears soaked the wool until she had no more left to cry. At dawn, she packed her things and mounted up. She planned to leave by noon. She wasn't running away, she wasn't fleeing, she was simply empty. And no matter how many times she replayed the night in her mind, she couldn't unhear Zane's voice. Raw, jagged. "Leave." Clara pressed the heels of her palms to her eyes, trying to will away the memory. It didn't help. Nothing helped. Around mid-morning, the sound of hooves thundered up the trail. Clara stiffened her horse, raising its head sharply. And then, there he was, Zane covered in dust, unshaven, his dark eyes hollow. He pulled his horse to a breathless stop, his chest heaving as if he'd ridden without rest all night. They stood there, staring at each other for what seemed like an eternity. Clara swallowed hard, the air thick in her throat. "Zane, I'm—" Before she could finish, he slid off his horse. His boots hit the ground, and he stood before her like a man fighting a storm inside himself. "I was wrong," Zane said hoarsely, the words cutting deep. Clara froze, every muscle tense. "I believed the first lie I heard." He continued, his voice breaking. "Because I was hurting. Because I was angry. Because losing her, it tore me apart." Clara's breath caught. Zane's pain mirrored her own, and for the first time she understood the depth of his grief. "I blamed you because it was easier than blaming myself," Zane said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "Easier than admitting I was afraid every day that something like this would happen. Afraid I couldn't protect her. Afraid I'd lose the last piece of my family." A gust of wind rattled the shack walls. Clara's voice was barely audible as she whispered, "And you think I didn't love her too?" Zane's expression cracked like a mask falling away after too long. "I know," he whispered. "I know that now." Clara's heart twisted. She saw his pain raw and unhealed, and in that moment, something between them shifted. "Emma," he said softly, "I came to ask for your forgiveness." Clara laughed, but it was bitter like ash on her tongue. "Forgiveness, Zane, you told me I caused her death." He flinched, the pain flashing across his face. "I know what I said, and I hate myself for it." "You should," Clara said, her voice shaking. Because I tried so hard. I pulled her out of the way, Zane. I tried. Her voice cracked with the weight of everything unsaid. Zane's eyes softened, full of sorrow. I know you did, he said gently. I saw where the rope hit. I saw your tracks. I talked to the boy who saw the latch get broken, and I heard the truth from the marshal this morning. Clara blinked, confusion clouding her thoughts. The marshal? Zane nodded. They caught the men near the far ridge. One confessed they broke the gate. Another said they threw your bandana scrap to frame you. Clara's breath caught in her chest. So it really wasn't my fault. It never was, Zane whispered, his voice low and thick. I was just too blind with grief to see it. Clara's vision blurred, but she forced the tears back. She died scared, Zane. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. She died saving you. Clara staggered back, shaking her head. Don't say that. Zane's voice remained firm, despite the pain in it. You need to hear it. Rhea loved you. She followed you because she trusted you. And she would hate that we're standing here, hurting each other, over something those men did. Clara turned away, staring at the dried, dusty ground. I can't go back, Zane. Not after everything. He took a step forward, then paused, giving her space. I'm not asking you to come back for the ranch. Another pause. I'm asking you to come back for me. Her breath caught in her chest. Zane's voice softened, raw as gravel. When Rhea died, I thought the world had ended. But last night after you left, it felt like it ended twice. Clara closed her eyes, the weight of his words pressing on her chest. He continued, his voice low, almost broken. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to say the right words. But I know this much. Rhea would want you here with me, keeping me from turning into a bitter old hermit. Clara couldn't help herself, a small laugh slipping through her lips despite everything. You're halfway there. Zane huffed a quiet breath, a laugh that barely escaped. Exactly why I need you back. Her shoulders shook with laughter and grief, conflicting emotions swirling within her. Zane, I'm scared. He nodded, stepping closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth radiating toward her. Me too. His confession was so raw, so honest, it cut through all her defenses. Zane's voice softened as he spoke again, quieter. Clara, if you come back, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for what I said. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you know you're wanted, needed, and safe with me. Her heart twisted painfully in her chest. Zane, I don't know how to trust someone after something like that. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them until there were only inches left. Then with quiet certainty, he whispered, Then we learn together. One step at a time. Clara's breath caught her chest tightening as she nodded, slow and cautious. Zane exhaled in relief, his body visibly relaxing. His shoulders dropped and his eyes softened. When she didn't step back, he reached for her gently, his hands brushing against her arms with the lightest touch. Can I? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Clara nodded, her heart beating in her throat. Slowly, carefully, he pulled her into his chest, holding her as if she were fragile, precious. Clara leaned into him just a little, feeling the warmth of his embrace and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Later, when they rode back toward the cabin, Clara felt a strange mix of sorrow and hope swirl in her chest. Rhea's absence would always hurt, but the cabin didn't feel cold or haunted the way she had expected. It felt sad, yes, but also warm, full of memories, full of chances. When Zane lit the lantern and motioned for her to come inside, his touch brushing against her hand, she felt something loosen inside her. A knot she had carried for too long began to unwind. He leaned close, his voice low. One more thing. Zane's lips brushed gently against her temple. If I tease you when you blush, you can yell at me. Clara elbowed him lightly, a smirk tugging at her lips. Oh, I will. and call me names. I already do. And storm out dramatically. Clara rolled her eyes, but her heart felt lighter. Zane, she said with a sigh. He smiled softly, his voice firm but full of affection. But don't ever run away again. Her breath stilled, and she whispered, Not unless you tell me to. He shook his head, his voice a low rumble. Never again. And for the first time since Ria's laughter had faded from the world, Clara felt something settle inside her, a feeling both fragile and strong, something like love.